Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Skinny Pop Popcorn. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Oh, so light and crunchy. Skinny Pop Original Popcorn is the snack you've been searching for. Made with just 3 simple ingredients: popcorn kernels, sunflower oil, and salt. Snacking never felt or tasted so good. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Give yourself permission to snack and pick up Skinny Pop Original Popcorn today.
Pain means pause on the things you love, but green means go. Cool the pain with BioFreeze. Powerful pain relief for sore muscles and joints, simple backache, arthritis, strains, sprains, and bruises. BioFreeze, fast-acting menthol pain relief. Visit biofreeze.com, the #1 clinician-recommended menthol topical pain relief brand, based on a survey of clinicians, chiropractors, podiatrists, massage therapists, physical therapists, retail pharmacists, and athletic trainers. Ipsos Clinician Survey. Use as directed.
Hollywood has never been one to shy away from going back to the well to rehash what worked before. But can a prequel of a remake with the same name still bring Antarctic chills? Find out as we attempt to prove to you that 2011's The Thing is not that bad. Welcome one and all to It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades and B movies, and a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. When it comes to seminal 80s horror films, obviously some of the first thoughts in your mind are going to be maybe the Friday the 13th franchise or the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. But you could not go wrong if you mentioned John Carpenter's The Thing. Well, that movie is great. We're not going to talk about it today. Not directly. No, we're talking about the 2011 movie, The Thing, which is the prequel to the 1980s movie, The Thing. And here to join me to talk about this thing is Carson Elcombe back on the show. How you doing, man?
Buddy, I'm doing so well. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was trying to think of a creative line to say with my intro here, but nothing came to mind.
I stole all the words.
Touche.
So, Carson, you are the one who brought this movie to the table. And I'll be honest, it's been a long time since I've actually watched the 1980s, the Thing, and I have never watched the original from the 50s. So this was kind of like almost like a fresh take for me. But what is it about this film that made you want to bring The Thing to talk about The Thing?
Well played. Honestly, The Thing 1982 is probably my top 5 favorite films just ever made. Especially just the story behind it and how it was so not well received at the time to going to kind of being this cult classic amongst a lot of cinephiles and in the film community as a whole. And it's always fascinated me because as much as the original is a horror movie, it's such this psychological dive into the state of kind of where we are in the world. Not a lot of people tend to trust each other anymore. It's a lot colder than it used to be. And I feel like it was almost a glimpse into the future. So The Thing holds a really tried and true spot in my heart for a lot of reasons. I think it's one of John Carpenter's best films, if not his best film. So when I started diving more into it and rewatching The Thing a few months back, I was like, I've never seen the 2011 prequel. And obviously at that point, I looked at the reviews and was like, you know what this slots right into? It's not that bad.
Right.
So I'm like, I emailed you right away and I was like, we got to do this. So I went out this past weekend and bought it on Blu-ray for $5 at a Sunrise Records. And I would say I really enjoyed it for the most part. And it's definitely got a few issues and a few things here and there, but I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation.
Why does it feel like anytime, and I know I'm guilty of this now, and I'm curious if you do the same thing now, you know, that you're a regular on the show. When you watch a movie, do you instantly look at the Rotten Tomatoes score, see the green tomato and go, this looks like a job for It's Not That Bad?
I'm not going to lie to you. There's been a few times I've just watched something and then gone to the Rotten Tomatoes page and been like, oh, you know what? That might be in an email to Jason and in a few days. So I would be lying if I said I didn't.
Yeah, it's one of the things where like people who know the show, if you sit there and say, yeah, the movie qualifies, they get it. You say that to people who have never listened to the show, they're like, qualifies for what? I'm like, oh, you don't know. You just don't know.
You're just a learning. You got to get into the groove. Go back and watch every episode. Then you'll know.
You do realize that we are well over 140 episodes of the main show and over 200 episodes of everything. So, I mean, I'm not going to say no. Yeah, if people want to deep dive the whole show, you go right ahead. I will take every listen. But before we take all your listens, we need to take a pause here because we're about to take The Thing, the 2011 version, the prequel, and trailerize it.
In the frozen tundra of Antarctica lies a creature that takes over, clones and kills that which it comes in contact with. And no, it's not a Hollywood exec with a quick cash brainstorm. Witness The Thing, the prequel to The Thing. Confused yet? So is everyone at Thule Station. When an alien spaceship is discovered, they'll bring in that cute girl from Scott Pilgrim to help them bring back an alien. Little do they know, it's still alive and looking for a new skin to wear. Now, the girl who got left behind in Death Proof because she couldn't do anything has to do everything in the most extreme cooking show ever created. She'll flambe her way through creature after creature if they don't meet her dental standards. It's the prequel that no one asked for. The Thing. Rated R for roast everything.
I love that. Your trailer reads are always like the best part of this show at the start. Like they're always eloquently done.
So maybe now I need to put them at the end of the show so people will actually listen all the way through. If you stop after the trailerize, you are missing a ton of fantastic conversation. I will say though, and I'm going to get this right out on Front Street right now. It is hard to watch Mary Elizabeth Winstead and not think about all of the other absolutely iconic roles that she's been in. This was completely fresh for me. And I'm just like, no, she's not the girl from Scott Pilgrim. You know, she's not Harrison Delu from Ahsoka. Must not compare.
No, honestly, like it's also like wild, her filmography in general. Like every corner of, I feel like, the cinematic landscape you can look at, and somehow she's just in that movie. So, and honestly, she was one of the brighter spots in this film for me. So I'd love to get into it.
This episode is brought to you by Skinny Pop Popcorn. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Oh, so light and crunchy. Skinny Pop Original Popcorn is the snack you've been searching for. Made with just 3 simple ingredients: popcorn kernels, sunflower oil, and salt. Snacking never felt or tasted so good. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Give yourself permission to snack and pick up Skinny Pop Original Popcorn today.
Why wait for Labor Day to save big on window treatments? Save now at Blinds.com's Labor Day Early Access Sale. Blinds.com is the better way to shop for custom blinds, shutters, and shades. 100% online with upfront pricing and free shipping. And Blinds.com has covered over 25 million windows, all backed by their 100% satisfaction guarantee. Shop Blinds.com's Labor Day Early Access Sale now for up to 45% off. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be. All
right, well, let's get into who is in this film. And I am going to apologize right off the bat because there are a bunch of names here that I don't know I'm going to be able to pronounce properly. I am going to give it the absolute college try. And if I mess up, I'm sorry. I'm an idiot in the basement with a microphone.
It's funny you say that because I was looking at the cast just before we hopped on to see, because I know what questions you're going to ask me near the end. So I wanted to make sure I had a good grasp of everyone. And I was thinking, I'm like, oh man, I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce half of these people's names. So as long as we don't butcher them egregiously, I think we're all right.
All right, well, here we go with the absolute college best try here. The movie stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Joel Edgerton, Ulrich Thompson, Eric Christian Olsen, Adewale Akinoi Agbaje, Trond Espensheim, Christopher Hivium, and Kim Bubbs. Okay. The movie was directed by Matthijs van Heiningen. Again, I'm sorry if I messed up that name. I am really trying here. He has only directed one movie since this film. That was The Forgotten Battle. But he has done some video work, including a Coca-Cola Marvel TV spot that was set at Disneyland Paris. So that's pretty cool. I guess he's MCU now. He's
Talk about
absolutely
career
MCU.
success.
Right? He's absolutely MCU now. There are some accolades for this film, and justly so. At the 2012 Saturn Awards, it was nominated for Best Horror or Thriller Film, lost to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And it was nominated for Best Makeup, lost to X-Men First Class. At the 2012 Visual Effects Society Awards, it was nominated for Outstanding Animated Character in a Live-Action Feature Motion Picture, lost to Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And at the 2011 Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards, it was nominated for Best Film, lost to Rise of the Planet of the Apes. The movie had a budget of $38 million, and this is sad. Not sad because the movie wasn't good, sad because people didn't go see it. The domestic box office for this film was only $16.9 million, and worldwide only made $31 million. When it debuted on the October 14th, 2011 weekend, debuted at number 3 with $8.4 million. That is half of what the number one film was. Real Steel in its second week was $16.2 million. However, also debuting that week was The Big Year, debuted at number 9 with $3.2 million. Number 2 was the first week of the re-release of Footloose with $15.5 million. So a re-release of a Kevin Bacon film. It's a good Kevin Bacon film, don't get me wrong. Beat out by almost double The Thing.
You know what the funniest part of that is I bought the Blu-ray for this movie on Friday evening. I went to the mall and picked it up. And I didn't watch it that night. And then Saturday, I was like, okay, I'm settled down. I'm going to watch it tonight. And then I found out that the Temple of Doom's 40th anniversary re-release was in theaters that night. So I also skipped watching The Thing to go see a movie re-released in theaters.
I mean, I get it. And I absolutely love going back to the theaters and watching some of these older films being released. I've done that a number of times this year alone. And it is fantastic to see some of those older films once again on the big screen. I love it because I don't have a TV that big in my room. But the reason why we are here, not because Carson brings a pretty damn decent movie selection to the table, are the critics. Over at Rotten Tomatoes, the film has a tomatometer of only 34%. Boo, critics. Boo.
Honestly, a travesty.
Right? But let's get to the other numbers here. The audience score is 43%. Over at Metacritic, the film has a Metascore of 49. At IMDb, it has 6.2 stars for a 62%. The movie database also has it at 62%, and Letterboxd has it set at 2.7 stars, giving it a 54% rating, giving this film the aggravated aggregate of 50.6%. So still a college fail, but kind of sits right in the middle of it. So before we get into this, Carson, I'm going to ask you, 50.6%, how grossly under is that number?
It's funny you ask, because I thought about this a lot going through all the reviews similarly a couple days back when I watched it. And I understand for the era. So in 2011, I could understand why you would be giving this movie, I'll say between 40 and 60%. It was a sequel or a prequel to a movie that at the time still wasn't in its, I'd say, golden era age of how we look back on it now. Like I would say in 2011, The Thing was still pretty, I'm not going to say underground, but it was still not really founded in the cinema community once again. So I look at it being a prequel to a movie that did equally as poorly at the time in the box office, and 82 is up against the likes of E.T., for instance. And I mean, that's just a crapshoot once you get in there to fight against that. But I personally think I would have this between a 65 and a 75%.
Yeah.
And
a 50 aggravated aggregate seems decidedly low.
Yeah, like it's just enough where I'm like, I understand why, but I don't think it's remotely fair. And I think we should get it out of the way right off the bat here. And at the end of the day, it's the biggest, I'd say, downside to the movie. And it is replacing John Carpenter's brilliant practical effects with a CGI'd version that was not very refined, even for the standards of 2011.
Yeah, we'll get to the CGI in a little bit, but I want to give you a comparable before we get to our breakdown here. Going back to Rotten Tomatoes, looking at The Thing, tomatometer of 84% for a horror film and a 92% audience score. So obviously you're trying to jump into the world of something that really is truly beloved. I mean, the film, while it didn't do well at the box office per se, and by the way, E.T., that's part of the childhood trauma pack right there. E.T. creeped the hell out of me.
What kid didn't it creep out, though? Like, I don't know a single person who saw it as a child and wasn't terrified by that little shit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. The whole E.T. with like the quarantining bubble over the house and the people in the hazmat suits, like, that was creepy. All right. The never ending story. The 80s were terrorizing me. Freaking death of Optimus Prime. Dun, 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 dun. You wonder why people of my age have problems. The 80s movies.
Sheer nightmare fuel.
Yeah, but we survived. We survived. Somehow. But let's get to the breakdown of this film here before I diatribe and turn this into a therapy session because of all my 80s movies. Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Kate Lloyd. Your thoughts?
So I think she served as a solid protagonist for this film. I don't really have a lot of complaints with her, but I feel in terms of the acting throughout the whole movie in general, I understand when you look back at the 82 film to start off, one of the big issues with it was people couldn't resonate with the characters because it actually didn't really develop any of them besides RJ McCready. When you look at this one, it kind of falls into a similar boat. The movie moves really fast, which in a lot of ways is really nice, especially for the run times we have nowadays. But I find with that, you still do lose some of that, okay, I care about you, but why? And she really just thrusts herself into that centric role, and she does well in it, and she really, I'd say, anchors it down for a good chunk of the movie. But it's just, I have trouble relating to the character because I don't know anything about her besides that she is a very talented paleontologist or archaeologist. I can't remember which one. So as much as I thought her performance was good, and she did pretty much, I would say, as good as you can with what she was handed as a script, not to say it's bad, it falls a little flat for me in terms of just the development and background of me caring if she lives or dies.
Yeah, I think that the thing here is that, I mean, there's a couple of things. First of all, it was an actual choice to, cause that language barrier between Kate and everyone else. That's a calculated choice in order to be able to help, add to the isolationism of the Antarctic setting. And they based the character roughly on Ripley from Aliens. But here's where these things differ. Ripley, Sigourney Weaver, in Aliens, the best alien movie, period. Bar none. I will die on a hill on that one. Okay? Aliens is the best alien film. Sigourney Weaver is badass in that film. Absolutely badass. And everyone on her team, even though most of them die, still badass. That was more like a horror space action film. This is more of a, I don't want to say it's a monster film, and I don't want to say it's a horror film. It's definitely a suspense film, for sure. And the thing with Kate is that she's not badass. She's not going to be picking up machine guns and start doing somersaults and whatnot and start badassing her way through the whole thing. It's not happening. So for that, I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead was a fantastic choice. She's a scientist. Her job is to science things. Given the fact that she has done, cold weather projects, makes sense that she would be able to use a flamethrower, because I could see a flamethrower being used on one of those things because you try to melt the ice or whatever the case may be. She's not an athlete, but because she is a field scientist, she's still capable enough to be able to handle herself in this. And for the most part, she's doing her best to rationalize some kind of way of surviving given what she's deduced. It's almost like she's trying to form a hypothesis on these things in real time, like extreme real time. And in that, I think they nailed the casting, because you don't want someone who's, and I don't mean to say this in any kind of derogatory, you don't want someone going in jacked like Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2. You don't want someone going in with like the muscles popping and like sweat. No, this is not an action film. These are scientists in a really deadly, crappy situation in the cold. So give me someone who comes across properly as a scientist. And I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead was good for that.
100%. I follow that to a T with you. And unlike the flamethrowers, this movie is very much a slow burn in that sense too, as you do kind of grasp the situation as the movie expands. And I think the biggest issue for me, kind of in the central start of the movie, besides the awkward child sex joke in the helicopter to Drake just to start things off, was I think it seems as if, and I wrote it here, some of the group's decisions feel too predetermined, as if they watched the first movie. So, for instance, right off the bat, when the first guy gets attacked underneath the facility and he gets dragged under, they're instantly like, get the flamethrower. And it's very much like, I get they take a few shots at it and that doesn't work, but it just seems like a very drastic jump to something that should have been a more gradual like build. I know that's really nitpicky depending on how you look at it, but it's just some of those early decisions. And it might just be because it's written so similarly, obviously plot-wise, to the original. But I do definitely feel like some of the points in the movie, I sit back and go, I feel like every single one of these characters has seen the original.
I think there's a trepidation when you go into not replicate the world, but add to the world, because the whole game plan. By the way, this film, we're going to spoil it. So just so you know, dear listeners, we're going to spoil the ever loving thing out of this. Okay, so bear with us here. The danger in taking on a prequel to a cult classic is that you have to, at the same time, pay homage while also not painting by numbers. And you want to make sure that people will sit there and go, it feels like it's in this world. It feels like a proper thing movie. And like, at what point do you sit there and start to take little chances? It does feel like the movie almost played it safe. But that being said, there were, according to IMDb, tons of studio interference with this film, to the point where the director has actively chosen to, I guess, not work in the States anymore or work with American studios. So I get it. And the other thing too is the studio doesn't want anything to happen to its IP that they can't recover from, or have to wait like decades before they can go back and revisit the IP. So there's got to be a weird juggling act when you're trying to plot something out like this.
And speaking on how you mentioned Alien a couple times too, is this production, based on what I was looking at, the entire production of this is eerily similar to Alien 3 with David Fincher, and how he had this idea for a grittier, kind of darker toned Alien film, and it just got so overhauled by executives and the studio that it just became an absolute disarray.
Yeah, the scariest words in Hollywood are not box office bomb. They are not directed by UA Boll. They are studio notes.
Easily can get behind that 100%.
Ulrich Thompson, who played Dr. Sander Halvorsen. Carson, the bad guy. Your thoughts?
Pretty much just as you said it. He was the bad guy. And I do respect kind of his arc in the sense of, hey, he really wants that power to be like, hey, I was the man that discovered this. Like, I'm bringing a new entire realm of thinking to human civilization. But then again, this is getting really nitpicky at times too, but he didn't seem like insane and like enough to kind of consist of the decisions he made. This is gonna sound bad, but one of my least favorite parts of the movie is I don't get to see him get mauled by the thing in the kitchen. They like cut that out by the fridge, and I was like, man, I want to see that man just get torn to shreds. A little sadistic, but he was an asshole. So, but I mean, at the end of the day, I'm saying he's an asshole, which means that he obviously did something right. But it just seems he seems like a little bit of a bland villain to me.
I mean, he seems more like a science villain. You know, this isn't someone who's going in there to, you know, he didn't know that there was an alien there. He knew there was something. He knew there was definitely something that needed to be, you know, excavated out of this ship that they found. Probably had a good thinking that it was an alien, but, you know, he is very much, you know, the project and the end goal, you know, safety seventh at this point. And it's a very almost passive aggressive kind of dominance that he has over Kate at the beginning, right? The whole, you know, you won't interrupt me, or you won't treat me like that in front of the men again, kind of thing. Like,
yeah, it's very patriarchal in terms of the 80s and the time, and like she's just not respected. So I think in that respect, like, it absolutely follows an accurate and not respectable manner, but respectable into acknowledging what the times were and how she easily would have been treated that way. But yeah, he just, to me, consistently comes across like, you're a scientist, and I get at the end of the day, you want your big gig and your big payday and all the glamour and glory you're going to get from that. But should you also not, as a senior scientist, seemingly 20-ish years older than the protagonist, not be slightly more aware? Like in the original The Thing, the main scientist was the one that, I'm blanking on his name completely, Blair, was the one that kind of put things in motion, realizing like, hey, this thing can take over the world. Like, if we do not isolate this here, we're all screwed. And then he goes insane and kind of has his villain arc that way. I understand not wanting to repeat that for the prequel, but the first one was just more a believable aspect to me, both being scientists.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want a scientist, you know, to be like strong arming anything and, you know, punching and shooting his way through. That's not him. That's not the character. But the nice thing is, you know, as things start to turn and the balance of power, or at least the power dynamic in the group starts to change, when they start to try to figure out who may be, you know, the alien or taken over, like just the visceral reaction that Kate gives him, that alone, Mary Elizabeth Winstead's just sneer, the open your mouth, like kind of like she had it with this guy. And that's the thing. If your character can make another character act like that towards you, it is wrestling rules at this point. The heel has the pop, and it's all good.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that scene, actually, because that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, not only because it's a different perspective on the blood test scene from the first one, but it evolves on that. But that's not even the right word. It de-evolves on it, but in a really smart way, to where they have another reasonable metric of measuring this for the time in the 80s with the porcelain fillings. And it's enough to give you that taste of like, yeah, they're still trying to deduce exactly what McCready and the group did in the first one, but in a different way. So I actually really, really liked that take on things.
Plus, it happens at a point where they've already deciphered that, okay, so there was this, you know, the guy had a broken arm, and the metal piece or the metal rod got left out of the new body. The fact that the fillings were on the ground, and Kate put two and two together. So already she, who has the biggest brain in Antarctica at this point, has already deduced this from obvious things that we have seen. We see her putting things together. We see her figuring this. This isn't someone who's just going to Mary Sue her way through everything and, you know, just know things. She's figured it out, and the movie has let us see her figure it out, which is why when that balance of power shifts and Sandra doesn't really push back on it in that moment, shows that she understands more about what's going on than he does. And even he is deferring to her at this point. But even though it's more of a kind of an asshole kind of way of doing it. Eric Christian Olsen as Adam Finch. I wondered at the beginning of this film if there was a thing between Adam and Kate, but then they never really expanded into it. It was just, they were just kind of there. And I'm not quite sure what their relationship is, whether they just work together, whether they used to be together. So I'm confused on Adam, but your thoughts on him?
I think I like the dynamic he shared with Kate in a lot of the scenes. You kind of see that younger on the squad, up and coming, want to prove something kind of mentality in both of them, just obviously to a few different extents, one already being with the crew, one being brought in. But I think they connect to each other well on that side of things. And I think that makes the fillings, the teeth scene, all that more aggressive, because they kind of had this seeing eye to eye, maybe even subliminally, just quietly understanding of each other. And that was kind of almost a safety net for both characters that turns into, well, now each and every one of you, including you, are antagonists.
Yeah. And the fact that Kate had to send Adam to the side where she's not sure whether it's an alien or not, like, that was a cool moment. But I got a gripe with Adam's character. And again, it's not the way Eric Christian Olsen played him, okay? Because I think he did a very good job with this. But Adam gets killed, like, near the end-ish, but gets killed kind of in a cacophony of chaos that goes around all at once, right? And Carter is played by Joel Edgerton, who we're going to talk about in a little bit here, like, takes half the movie off, comes back, and then ends up being like the last person. It would have made more sense to me, and it would have been more impactful if Adam was the one who lasted to the end with Kate. I said I was going to spoil it, and then she had to kill Adam as opposed to it being Carter. Because with Carter, I'm like, I don't care whether she kills Carter or not, right? He's just a help out of there. That's it. With Adam, there's a past relationship there. So if Kate had to kill Adam at the end, then you have this really painful moment for Kate, kind of like when Wanda had to kill Vision in Avengers Infinity War. Like, that's a sacrifice moment for Kate. By making it Carter, you take that sacrifice away because the one person she had a connection with before getting up there is already dead.
Now picture that scene at the very end, which we'll get into later, but I absolutely actually love the scene. But how much more impactful would it have been if you see that shot of the earring missing when she's about to get in there, and that emotional resonation before she absolutely lights it up? Like, that's such an emotional moment in this film. And it's just like, maybe this is something that the execs up at Universal jumped in and said, hey, Joel Edgerton's being paid more, mostly because he's a bigger name. You make him go to the end, where it just, there's that little bit missing. And I think you nailed it right on the head.
Yeah. I mean, yes, Joel Edgerton is the bigger name at this point in their careers. You know, obviously he would then go on to, you know, also join the Star Wars universe and play Owen Lars in the Obi-Wan series. But at this point in the film, the only real connection that Carter and Kate have is that she doesn't watch sports. So she can't tell him that, yes, the Cavaliers did suck in 2011. I looked it up. They were horrible. LeBron was already in South Beach at this point, people. Like, Cavs did suck in 2011. Film is accurate to a sports perspective. But I mean, like, there's no juice when Kate kills Carter, at least from an emotional perspective. All you had to do was swap the arc of those two characters at the end. Let Carter be the one that gets part of the two-headed creature that needs to be flambéed outside. And let Adam go to the end. And again, nothing against the actors. It's just the way that the script played out. And I felt it pulled some of the potential for the gut wrench at the end.
It definitely sacrifices what it could have been by the route it takes. But I will push back a little bit on the idea that I think Carter was, and this might sound bad, but like, he comes off as more of like the stereotypical like man's man. He's the American helicopter pilot. And my assumption also partially is like RJ McCready was the pilot. And I think they wanted that connection to the first movie to like going to the end. So I can rationalize why they did it. I just think if you're going to do it, then have him land the helicopter, get out, and then have the attack go on or something, and the helicopter explodes. I don't know. You just can't take half the movie off, as you said, and expect me to feel the same way at the heaviest moments of the film.
And that's the other thing, too. If Joel Edgerton is the bigger star at this point, let him like be in the film.
I would say let him be the bigger star then.
You know, this isn't the Expendables 4 where Stallone gets to only show up for like 10 minutes and, you know, and call it a day. Make Joel Edgerton Adam and make Eric Christian Olsen Carter. And then all of a sudden, boom, like make that happen. Then make sure that Adam is the one that's killed at the end.
It seems like a very easy fix. I think Universal should probably hire us.
Yeah, pretty much. You could have had a better script, but you didn't call us. Trond Espen Seam as Edward, the number 2 to Sander. I like the addition that he adds to the power dynamic and the command structure, but your thoughts?
I like a lot of the Norwegians I actually really was able to resonate with, just on a sense of they're here to do a job very similar to the first one. They don't quite know everything going on because some of them don't speak English. But to me, each and every one of them had their place. And I don't like it. To me, it's really hard for me to kind of vocalize or put into words because they do kind of mesh into one character in a lot of ways, just because certain characters have that language barrier, certain characters don't, certain characters are speaking for each other. But I will say that every time he was on screen, I was more compelled. I was looking in more. I was maybe focusing a little more, being like, what, as the middleman between Kate and Sanders, is he really kind of divulging into mentally, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's almost like he, more than Sander, actually respects Kate's intelligence and what she's bringing to the team. So when things are starting to go down, he doesn't protest. He doesn't put up a fight. He knows that what Kate's doing is actually the smart thing to do. And he's the one that tells Sander at that point, it's like, she's in charge now. And it's not meant to be like a sneering or leering kind of thing. It's like, no, she's the one who's should be calling the shots at this point. And he says it in a way that's very matter-of-factly to Sander. So clearly it establishes that Edward and Sander have worked together a number of years and they have that ability. Like, clearly he appreciates Edward's input, which is why he didn't lose his shit at that point.
You know, what can two employees that dislike each other always agree on? The boss can suck. And I feel like that's very much where we find ourselves in that scene in particular, where they're deciphering everyone from fillings to no fillings.
Pretty much. Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaje as Jameson, the other helicopter pilot, who also went to check out the alien as the alien broke out of the ice. Also, why the hell would you go and check out an alien alone? Why are people in horror movies so dumb?
No, that was one of the things too I said. I was like, oh, okay, so it's going to jump out or something's going to happen. It's going to crack, whatever it may have been the moment he walked in there. Classic movie trope, but it's one of those decisions that just are interesting to me on a very base level sense. And one of the things at the start of the movie too that kind of just definitely troubles setting the tone is they find this alien spaceship. They find this alien and like they don't seem like inherently stoked on it. Like they're very much just like, oh, cool, we found an alien. I would be losing my.
Well, I mean, they
like,
were partying and singing songs and whatnot. Like, I enjoyed that part because, you know, when you're up at the Antarctic and that's your team and that's how you celebrate, I'm cool with that. But the thing is, you know, that falls into typical horror movie tropes, like all alone by yourself and you're going to go check out the place that you shouldn't check out. Horror movies.
Bye, Felicia.
Right. Christopher Hivju as Jonas. Very identifiable for me because I watched Game of Thrones. Pleasure to see him here. He fits the bill perfectly. Your thoughts on him?
Honestly, solid. Like, I thought he was grounded. I thought most of the decisions he made sense. And he unfortunately died an incredibly gruesome death. So RIP to our king.
right? You know what? I'm just going to put this out there. Pretty much everyone else on the team, aside from Kim Bubs, for obvious reasons, kind of felt like the same character. Norwegian bearded guy in the cold and scared. So it's hard to kind of really find much differentiation between all of them.
No, exactly. And that's what I was saying before too, is like they all, as much as the thing is an amalgamation of everything, kind of the characters become a bit of an amalgamation of each other, which is definitely, I'd say, one of the downing points to the movie.
Yeah. But since we mentioned Kim Bubs, who played Juliet, who, yes, like everyone else, met an untimely end, your thoughts on having her on the team?
She falls under this kind of same weird category where I'm like, you were there, you were another person at the start. Was she like together with Henrik, the guy that died right off the bat, or were they just like close or something? Was she just upset? Like I couldn't actually decipher that, or if I missed it.
I think they were just close. I think she mentioned that he had young kids, so that's kind of why she was really sad afterwards. So like they didn't really go into much of a backstory on some of these people, and that could be hard to do because we're not going to get to know them really all that well because they ain't going to last long. Sorry, but it's a horror movie and people are going to die. The problem, I think, is that some movies do it right in that they can introduce you to a handful of characters and get you to care about them, and then they're going to kill them off. But at least when they die, it's like, okay, all of a sudden, now you feel something for them. Rogue One, I think, did this the absolute best. All these characters that they introduced to you did not make it to the end. Like, that's a ballsy move. Like, we're going to make a film, and everyone that you've, discovered and met and cared for over the last 2 hours, they dead. Here, yes, we have the main players. We have the ones that we know are going to, make it at least close to the end. Everyone else, it's almost like they were treated, at least as far as character development goes, they were treated like they were on Star Trek wearing red shirts.
No, 100% with you, because, and I think the first one does this better as well, in a way that each person has a way more defined job to do. So even though if you don't get an inherent backstory on them, you still know who the radio guy is. You still know who the chef is. You still know who the two engineers are, and so on and so forth. So if you can't fall back on their inherent character arc, you could fall back on their importance to the group. And this one, like, I don't even know why she was there.
Yeah.
And and then I also have been grappling with, okay, how did she become a thing? There's usually a lot of hints in the first one that you can try to theorize and divulge into while still keeping it under wraps, as John Carpenter likes, and for you to decide that on your own and try to figure it out. But this one, I'm just floored. I'm like, what? Like, when did this happen to you? Which I know is a part of the movie that we're supposed to extrapolate on, but there's just not even a rational picking point for me because we don't even see her for most of the first act.
Yeah, all she is she's a geologist. That's her raison d'etre at this point. Really, the only one who had more of a at least a character, not arc, but like at least a character trait to them was Lars, as played by Jørgen Longhell. He's the guy who could not speak English. But again, this accents the isolationism and the paranoia in that there is a language barrier to overcome while they were trying to overcome a dying barrier at this point.
This dude couldn't speak any English, and yet he was my favorite out of, I'd say, the Norwegian team by far. Like when he takes the blanket off the little case, then he opens up, he's just like, grenade.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Love that, man.
When you're trying to avoid, dying, and you also have to be able to learn how to communicate with someone that you cannot communicate with, like Lars had really good moments in his silence and in his pantomiming, and as a way to communicate than some of the others did, and they had lines, English lines.
No, this dude was my hero in the movie. Not even from an actual, obviously, protagonist perspective, just because that was a cool dude. He did like everything he had to do, made smart decisions for the most part, met a tragic end that was disappointing, and I have no problems with it. So that's a win for me in this movie.
I will say, and you kind of pointed on this, like, early on in the show, this film has a fantastic pace to it. Like there's no breath whatsoever. It's not like it just rams it down your throat. It is very evenly paced, but at a very stressful, tense tempo throughout the entire thing. And finally, when Kate, chars Carter at the end, and that we know, like she's safe-ish now, we hope, we think, it's an ambiguous ending, but we can breathe at that point. And you don't realize how much you've been holding your breath for, the better part of an hour and a half. It's very, very well paced.
Easily. It's one of the movie's, I think, stronger kind of pieces is that there's never a point in the movie where I'm bored. And that's always obviously a great sign to have. But it's just, besides the lack of true character motivation, it never keeps me wanting.
All right. You mentioned the CGI at the beginning of the show. Obviously, there is a bit of it in this. There's a bit of, creature effects going on here. Your thoughts on the way the aliens looked?
I'm going to take one right from Jeff Goldblum. You were so preoccupied with the fact that you could, that you never stopped to think if you should. And it goes into that mucky era of certain studios had CGI figured out. The Avengers came out the following year and was incredible for the CGI it had. You had Transformers a few years back. You had Pirates of the Caribbean a few years back. So some studios kind of had it down, but I don't know if this was an execs thing, if this was just a general studio thing, because obviously Universal made some of the movies I just mentioned, or a movie I just mentioned, but I think I also, as a fan of the Thing franchise, have such an appreciation for practical on-set artistry. And that's something that made the first one so lovable, is because there were thousands of man hours that went into making the amalgamations. Like the practical effects team on the first film literally did not take a day off of work for 3.5 months to make sure it was done. And I'm not saying anyone has to starve themselves physically and emotionally that much to make a movie, but it shows in the finished product. And this just gives me the vibe of, hey, CGI is this brand new thing still that's getting really refined, and we can take an old property and pump it in there and make it better. And it didn't work. Like that initial scene in the airplane where the guy's eyes start falling off his head to the side and he opens up. I couldn't take it seriously, which is sad because that part of the movie is brilliantly done to where you're thinking it's the other guy on the helicopter that's actually going, like has the thing inside of him, but no. And it just takes all of that stress and internal emotion and just kind of makes you stop for a minute and be like, oh, that's kind of what you look like. And if that was a practical effect, it just, when you see the actors with it and you see it visually on screen, it just makes you feel something inside. And maybe this is just me as a film lover, and you can kind of connect to that, but you can't help but feel like they just did too much for the sake of doing too much.
Yeah. I mean, obviously in 2011, people want to see the alien. The people want to see the thing, right? They want to see this creature. They want to have those moments. But to the same token as well, I point to Cloverfield as maybe one of the better films that understood that you don't need to see the boogeyman. The boogeyman is scary because you don't see it. The imagination can be one of the scariest damn things for the audience member when they are watching a film. So if you do things more in, off camera or through sound design or just through implication or suggestion, the mind is going to create something more horrific than any CGI house could ever. So maybe, and then you run the risk at that point, right? Yes, there was some fantastic action in this film. Yes, because we are pulling up the flamethrowers again, we want to see aliens turn into char babies. I get it, because they did that in the first one, right? But maybe be a little bit more subtle, maybe a little bit more mysterious and tense, and let the imagination do the work. So A, you save on your CGI budget, but B, you create a more mental journey for the audience as opposed to literally painting it right in front of their faces.
Yep, I am 100% on board with you. And picture that scene with the helicopter. I know I'm using this as an example and beating it to death, but picture you don't even see any of what just happened. You don't see the guy's face turn into this weird whatever. You don't see any of the real lead up. You just see Kate trying to wave them down. They don't. 15 seconds later, that helicopter tailspins, goes down. And then in 30 minutes, you still have Carter and Derek show up. Like, it adds this level of ominous to have the characters be able to describe what happened in there, rather than just showing me the 10-15 second scene beforehand. It just, to me, it just gives you that suspension of belief, like you just talked about, and how just because you got to see it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to resonate.
Yeah, I think part of the problem too is that you're in an era where there's a lot of CGI being done. I mean, you mentioned the Avengers, right? So obviously a couple of years before this, you've got Iron Man and you've got the Incredible Hulk and you've got Thor, right? So you have all these big budget CGI heavy films sometimes that are wowing audiences. And, maybe I'm just taking, maybe I'm just not certain that audiences would go for a more psychological movie, but to the same token, why not give it a try? Why not try to create something that doesn't do the same thing that everyone else is doing? Create something that is more cerebral and play on the imagination.
A great film I like to use as an example for exactly what you just said perfectly is Get Out. You really don't have any of that true action element until the back half of the last act. But yet you're terrified through the entire film, and you really don't know anything because the main character doesn't know anything. Daniel Kaluuya doesn't know anything. He's trying to piece it together himself, and that's exactly what these characters do. They try to piece it together themselves, but you don't always have to inherently visually show me that. So I think you nailed it perfectly.
All right, so Carson, it has come time. Who is your MVP of 2011's The Thing?
It's honestly, it's funny now that I've kind of come to this conclusion throughout the episode, because I had a 3 names going in, and I honestly think it's Jorgen Langhel. Like, Lars is honestly my favorite character in this movie. His character resonates as someone that's, as you said before, trying to survive with obviously one of the hardest things in general being that language barrier. He's entertaining to watch. He makes smart decisions for the most part. And you honestly feel something when he dies, unlike a lot of the other people in this movie. So for such a small part, I think he actually carries a really strong workload for what we're handed with this 12-13 bunch of characters.
Yeah, Jorgen Langhel really did a good job, given the role that he was given. Also, I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead did a fantastic job, but my MVP is Ulrich Thomsen. I love it when a character, or more to the point, when an actor can create a character that you despise so much, and it makes the eventual death of that character in the film that much more satisfying. But he makes sense. He's not a villain. He's just not making the smartest decisions, and he's doing it in a very asshole manner. That's a choice. It's a smart choice. It fits well for the movie. And I think Ulrich Thomsen, in playing him the way he did, made everyone else around him better because he was able to elicit those visceral reactions from the other characters. So fantastic job done by Ulrich Thomsen. Carson, thank you so much for this. Now, please remind our listeners where they can find you out there on the interwebs.
You can find me at Carson Elk 12 on X these days.
All right, dude. The spot's always open for you whenever you want. And to you, our listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is a movie out there that you think is unfairly maligned or is just so bad there is no way in the Antarctic that we can find anything good to say about it, hit us up on social media at NotThatBadCast or go to our website at NotThatBadCast.com, because we're about to drop the movies we are talking about during Mocktober. So watch out for that blog post when it comes out. We want to hear your thoughts on those films because we want to shout you guys out during that celebratory month. Until next time, he's Carson, I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is It's Not That Bad, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.